Emails, phishing, and malspam are methods of delivering malware through malicious emails. Social engineering techniques are incorporated into these emails through the use of malicious links, macro-enabled documents, and email attachments. These types of emails are sent in the hope that the recipient's potential victims will perform some form of human-based user action, which will then open the gates for the attack. Phishing emails usually appear to be from someone the recipient knows and trusts. This could be a bank provider, online service provider, electrical company, or essentially any service the person uses. The emails tend to look almost exactly the same as they would look coming from the legitimate sender and can sometimes even include details that would appear to be true to the victim. This is all done in an attempt to manipulate recipients into clicking on malicious links or attachments. Malspam, short for malicious spam or malware spam, refers to any spam emails that deliver malware. These are usually unsolicited emails that contain infected attachments, phishing messages, or malicious URLs. If the recipient was to click on the links, they can be redirected to a malicious site set up by the threat actor, or even if they simply open an attachment, this can be enough to download malware onto the system. Both of these attack methods rely on human error, as they both require the victim to fall into the trap and actually click on a malicious link or open an infected attachment for the threat actor to proceed with their attack. Like many threat groups, ransomware operators obtain initial access through spear phishing T1566-1, that is, specially crafted emails containing malicious attachments. This particular threat group has managed to utilize banking trojans such as TrickBot as an initial access vector. These specially crafted emails often contain a protected Microsoft Word document containing a malicious macro. The threat actors behind ransomware evidently aware that administrators tend to disable macros by default due to increased security awareness. So to combat this, their phishing emails tend to contain a message that encourages target users to once the victim has taken the bait and activated macros, the malicious macro downloads a Trojan from an infected URL, which then establishes itself on a victim's machine. Public-facing services, any service exposed to the internet, which allows a user to authenticate directly to a system, also welcomes anyone else, including threat actors, to attempt to authenticate. Many organizations leave remote desktop protocol or DP ports open to the internet for the convenience of remote access without understanding the associated risk that this has. Our DP uses modern encryption, which is acceptable for the internet, but in its default state, it lacks multi-factor authentication MFA, meaning that anyone using compromised credentials, successful brute force, or a successful password spray attack is able to log in and access the network. From here, an attacker can attempt to propagate ransomware into the network as if they were on a virtual private network VPN. VPNs are often used as infection methods for ransomware. They provide access points for the threat actor. For example, when some of Fortinet's VPNs contain vulnerabilities CVE2018133379, this was targeted by threat actors and initial access was gained. For execution, the threat actor could open applications within the Windows environment, for example, PowerShell, Windows Command Shell, and scheduled tasks. To obtain credential access, the threat actors needed access to a session file that contained usernames and passwords in plain text for access to the VPN. For this, they were able to use Mimikatz, an open-source application that allows users to search for and steal administrator credentials that would be stored in the server. Kring, which is a form of ransomware often used to target exposed VPNs, was then installed but was concealed by another application download. For example, Kaspersky Lab. Once the ransomware had been successfully installed, it used 256-bit AES encryption and then RSA 8192 for the public key. Then a ransom note was dropped onto the machine demanding payment in order to release the keys needed to unlock the encrypted data. Droppers, loaders. Droppers are malicious programs designed to deliver malware to a device. Droppers usually come in the form of a Trojan that has the ability to carry out actions against the user's will. For example, delete, block, modify, or copy data. When a machine is infected with a Trojan, the normal functions will be disrupted. Once the dropper is loaded onto a device, it can then install other malicious software. This is known as its payload. Droppers tend to include several malware types, not necessarily created by the same threat actors. They hinder malware detection upon download and disable features that would prevent them from infiltrating the system. The dropper often contains some harmless files to take the attention away from the malicious ones. There are two types of droppers. Persistent dropper copies itself into a hidden file so that if the payload is removed, it can be reinstalled. Non-persistent dropper. Once the payload has been installed, it can uninstall itself from the infected devices. Loaders are malicious programs that load a dropper's payload onto the targeted device's memory. Loaders are used to grab malicious payloads from an attacker-controlled server. Loaders are similar to basic remote access Trojans as they give the threat actor access and control to the infected device. They are typically small files as to go undetected and bypass security monitoring tools. Nowadays, loaders have become more sophisticated and act to penetrate and distribute malware by providing access to infected systems. An example of a ransomware variant that is typically loaded by other malware is Ryuk ransomware. Ryuk is often loaded by malware such as TrickBot or BazerLoader after many illegal cyber activities. Like Ryuk, TrickBot is also attributed to the threat group Wizard Spider. Furthermore, TrickBot itself has been observed to be loaded by Imitet. Other loaders may also be used to load Ryuk, but the initial exploitation technique is the same. It is mainly carried out using phishing or spear phishing attacks. Exact procedures for initial compromise vary from loader to loader and version to version. Some of them come as infected Microsoft Office documents that download loaders upon execution. Others appear as links to Google Drive documents that provide an error message and ask the user to download the malicious file. More recently, attackers have been known to target exposed RDP services on which they launch large-scale password attacks against exposed RDP hosts to compromise user credentials and gain access. After the initial compromise and establishment of communications with Command and Control-C to servers, malicious activities can vary depending on the loader and the motivation of the threat actors. For example, TrickBot is capable of harvesting credentials, mail exfiltration, crypto mining, point-of-sale data exfiltration, and ransomware deployment. The loaders lay dormant for months and have the ability to load the Ryuk ransomware at a later stage. Software vulnerabilities. Many software vulnerabilities can be utilized by attackers to infect a system with ransomware. Notable examples include Proxy Shell in Microsoft Exchange and Log4Shell in the Apache web server. There were almost 20,000 software vulnerabilities reported in 2021 alone. The good news is that the majority of them have patches issued by the software vendor. You may be thinking, so what's the problem then? The problem is that it is very difficult and time-consuming for an organization to manage all patches across a large network, and so many organizations do not keep their system updated. NetWalker, a fileless ransomware variant written in C++ by Russian-speaking threat actors, was first discovered around August-September of 2019. It generated around $25 million for threat actors who used the variant, targeting multiple organizations including government, private, and education sectors. They exploited the vulnerability CVE20191458, which was released in December 2019. This is a vulnerability found in the Windows operating system where the Win3-K component is unable to properly handle objects in memory, also known as the Win3-K elevation of privilege vulnerability. Once access has been gained, NetWalker terminates all processes running, encrypts all files, and removes any backups that exist so the victim is unable to access any of their files. Once the threat actors have accessed sensitive files, They can then demand a ransom in order to release files back to the owner. Otherwise, they will be leaked online on NetWalker's website. Victims are given a week to pay the ransom fee before their sensitive data is published on the site.